Figures. Resource. actionfiguresresource.com.
Hello and welcome to Action Figure Resource. I'm Alex Shaw and with me is Jon Wesley Huff, founder of the Eon Quest line of figures. At the time of this recording, Eon Quest still has 22 days left on its Kickstarter, so we're going to be talking about its development for you here. This should either bring in some fresh supporters, or if the Kickstarter's done and successful, fill you guys in on what the line is about so you can start looking to pick some up. Jon, hello.
Hello.
Okay, so first question, and we always tend to ask this because it informs so much on the toy lines being created for Kickstarters. What toys had the most impact on you in your tender formative years?
That was a pretty easy one. Definitely Masters of the Universe. Number one. It got me right at the right time. I was like 4 going on 5. Pretty much was obsessed with it through 8 years old. So that was kind of like the perfect, time to sear into my brain. So, and I think you can probably, people who check it out can definitely see that that's a big impact. But that's what to say. I didn't dabble in other toy lines here or there. Transformers and a few other different lines, but definitely Masters of the Universe was the big one.
How old are you, if it's not a rude question?
Oh, that's not. I'm 35.
I'm 34, so I'm pretty much. I grew up at exactly the same time as these things were hitting shelves. In England, I think we got less stuff in general, but I was definitely into Masters of the Universe as well. That's what immediately just screamed out when I saw these guys here. If we're in terms of influences, we're talking Masters of the Universe has come through here. So you said Transformers. What other ones do you think have sort of worked their way in there in terms of influence?
Well, some of them, as far as the actual line itself, some of them were a little bit later on, probably not formative years, but I was a huge Marvel fan, so there's a lot of Marvel comics, I think. Jack Kirby, especially, New Gods.
Yes, I think definitely with that, with Uplink.
Oh, yeah.
With that silver balaclava thing going on there.
Yeah, him and like a Starbreaker, I think, definitely has some of the New Gods feel to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like just bright colors, all that kind of stuff. And another one, which actually was kind of funny, I never got the toys because they were a little bit too, they were kind of done and gone. But Crystar, I don't know if you know, or if you're familiar with Crystar.
Crystar, I'm looking now. I am not familiar with it, but I have heard of it.
Well, it was funny because that was actually, my friend Chuck had gotten the comic book series because Marvel did a comic book series, and he got the whole set somewhere really cheap at a comic book store, and he passed them on to me, and I just loved that comic book series. That was when I was like probably 10 or 11, and it was based on a toy line that they put out with Remco, I believe, but the toy line was way gone. I mean, it was done, and there was no eBay and no way of getting the toys, so I eventually, as an adult, I did buy the toys, but you'll see a lot of that influence really is Lord Eon definitely is an homage to that, and the Magmoids are kind of a homage to the bad guys in that, because it was like a crystal versus magma people basically. So
yeah, looking at Crystar here on Google Images, he looks like he could be part of this toy line.
Yeah. So that's definitely a big one, at least in this first series. I think with the first few action figures, that's another biggie.
Yeah. Okay, well, actually, to go on to Eon Quest itself, how did this begin life?
Well, there's kind of two answers to that. The action figure line itself, pretty much March of this year, I just, I'd been working with, I'd made friends with a couple indie toy makers over the years. The guys from Spy Monkey Creations, who do the Weaponeers of Manka line, became friends with the guy who does the Mystic Warriors of the Ring. They're kind of like these little muscle-like wrestling guys. And so I had learned a lot about the action figure making process, more than I even had. I'd learned quite a bit just being an action figure fan and kind of being into that whole, how are they made kind of thing. But I learned a lot more from them. So it kind of, for me, it really made me think, oh, okay, this is actually possible. This is actually doable, without having to spend too much money, to get things going. And so from there, that's where I decided, okay, I'm going to try to make my own action figure line. And when it came down to what I wanted to do, I sort of dipped back into the past. And when I was in high school, I created a comic strip for my school newspaper, which was called Eon Quest. Mm-hmm. And it was much more of a superhero focused, like kind of like superheroes in space, basically. And I thought, well, I've got this name. I always thought the name was cool, and I'd actually revisited it a couple of times, just to try to refine the concept. And so I thought, well, I had this concept I really like. Let's kind of take that name and that concept and bring it over into this toy line. So that was basically where it began, was just a crazy idea. Like, well, let's try it. Let's see it. I've been wanting to do this for my whole life, and why not give it a shot?
And releasing that in, did you say when you were in high school, that would have been the mid-90s. So that would have been the height of like dark heroes.
Yes.
Of the kind of thing. So this would have been like, I would imagine, kind of a breath of fresh air for everyone kind of already sick of Spawn at that point.
Well, yeah, it's funny that you say that, because it was weird. I always felt like I was kind of the odd man out with my peers who like comic books, because like you said, it was definitely the era of the grim and gritty dark hero. And I've never been that into it. I mean, there was a few of those books I read, but I was always into Fantastic Four and Iron Man. I was into Iron Man before before he was cool to be into. So it's just kind of, that's kind of where all of my sensibilities kind of trended. I mean, another thing that I think is probably a little bit of an influence on Eon Quest, especially with Uplink, as a lot of people think he looks. I think I've heard a lot of people think he looks sort of 90s. Yeah, I can kind of see that, because he has that kind of the floppy hair and the...
Also, the one cybernetic leg that back in the 90s, it was one cybernetic eye, or arm, or leg, or all three.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Terminator.
Exactly. And the funny thing about that was actually when I was doing that, I think the biggest influence on his look was probably Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah.
There was a Giant Boy, I think his name, because I was a big Legion of Superheroes, like the classic 80s, So it just, but of course, once you put like you said, once you put the cybernetic limbs on them, it's hard to make it not look a little 90s. So
yeah, of course. So you took the comic strip you'd done from the high school magazine, and that became what you decided you were going to sort of bring around and turn into these action figures, because it tied in so well with your sort of 80s sensibilities on what you'd really want to bring out now.
In a way, I mean, from where it was in my high school, the newspaper comic strip, I mean, it's changed significantly. Really, only from the actual comic strip, only one character survived.
Oh, right. Which one?
And that was Alchemris. And she's the one of the characters that hasn't gotten to figure form yet. Hopefully, maybe if this works someday, she will be. But
is she the girl with the fishbowl space helmet?
No, she's the one with
sorceress type lady.
Yeah,
gotcha.
The staff. Yep, yeah. And she was a little bit more. She had a similar look, although she was a little bit more superhero back then and didn't have her helmet and staff. Gotcha. But she had the same powers, which was transmuting elements basically from one to the other. But
you were using it more as sort of a thematic touchstone than directly lifting the characters you'd already created from that then.
Correct. Yeah, it was really just. I mean, and part of it was just like, oh, I love this name. Whatever I did to come up with that as a kid, which I do remember vaguely. I mean, it was basically just to make something that sounded cool and kind of had some impact, like Star Wars or Star Trek or something very simple like that. So that was a lot of it, and then part of it too, was there are definitely some similarities as far as like the space setting and that kind of thing, but there definitely is a very significant changes I made, and part of that was knowing what kind of action figure line I was going to want to create, and to make it a little bit more Masters of the Universe, a little more sci-fi fantasy than superhero.
Gotcha. Okay, so the next question is the characters in the series. If we could just take a quick look at Starbreaker, Uplink, Captain Wolfmoon, and Magmoids.
Sure.
Start with Starbreaker.
Okay. Yeah, so basically Starbreaker, he's the last of the Gamorons, and they were a race of super beings who were actually worshipped as gods by much of the Ninth Galaxy, where this story takes place. Mm-hmm. But something has happened to all of them. They had this mysterious disease, and they've all kind of died away, and he's the last of them. So the thinking behind him really was, he is probably in some ways, the most Masters of the Universe character, in terms of just, sort of like the amount of skin he's showing. He has the skimpiest, armor and stuff.
There's a bit of Zodak in there as well.
Yeah, I definitely think you can see a little bit of that. Again, like I said, New Gods was a huge influence on the look of him, and also the sort of a Roman centurion with his helmet. Going for. Yeah, so and really with him, he's the leader of the group of heroes that Lord Eon pulls together, and he has sort of a little bit of a past. You pick up, I think, in the very first mini comic. That is published out there online if anyone wants to check it out.
Oh, right. Cool.
You pick up that he's had a team before and something's gone wrong and he's not really into being a leader, but Lord Eon kind of drafts him because the situation's so dire.
And Uplink?
Uplink, he is actually another character that he didn't appear in the comic strip, but later on, after the comic strip was done, I kept on playing with Eon Quest, and eventually I'm going to try to show people. I have all kinds of drawings and half-finished comic books from when I was a kid that were after the comic strip, and Uplink was a character I'd created then.
Gotcha.
And so that's why he is probably definitely the most superhero of all the characters as they stand. He has the cape and the cybernetic arm.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a bit of a Green Lantern feel to him as well.
Yeah, which is so funny because it was sort of an inadvertent. I was playing around with colors for that character because he was one of the ones I didn't really have a clear idea of what I wanted to do with him color-wise. Mm-hmm. I settled on the green and black and white, not thinking about it. And then, of course, once you get it out in the world, it's like, oh, that looks like Green Lantern. I'm like, well, you're totally right. It definitely does. So his power is to connect directly with technology. So basically, he just can place his hand on anything, and he can talk to any technological system. Gotcha. The problem is, it talks back and it tries to take him over. Nice. So it's sort of So that's kind of where his arm and leg are actually they're not necessarily like he's a cyborg, but they're meant to represent his power. So. In the actual action figure will come with a regular human arm and a regular human leg.
Oh, I was going to ask about that. Nice.
Yeah, and then you can swap them out because all the limbs are swappable. You can swap them out to kind of show that process of as he's connecting with technology, it starts to kind of try to take him over. So that's his big weakness.
So his power comes with a drawback. That's good. Especially back in the days of sort of the 80s cartoons and throw-ins, they didn't actually put as much thought as you are now into coming up with the characters. It's just like, this guy has a really long neck that can come out of him. There was no major weakness to Mechaneck, at least not that I read about or saw. But the idea of actually being able to have a double-edged sword to their powers is great.
Well, yeah. Well, I think part of that too is really from my, to me, the comic books and the story, it's just as important as the action figures. So that's why I really tried to, as much as possible, make these full-fledged characters. And in the course of the first run of mini comics that will come with the action figures, there's a lot to do. You have to introduce the characters and put them on a story and everything. So but I'm hoping that people will see when they read them, they start to get a sense of the characters and maybe even come to care about them too as people. So
nice. So you say you can read all of these online right now?
Well, you can read the very first one.
Oh, the first one. Okay.
Yeah, it's on eonquest.com.
Okay, we'll stick a link up on the video. Yeah,
and so the rest of them will be coming with the action figures.
Gotcha.
So if it's kind of like you give them that one to hopefully get people hooked and
taste it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Captain Wolfmoon.
Captain Wolfmoon, he is it's funny because he's probably the character that I've gotten the most reaction to, pretty much immediately. I think people have just really taken to him. He was basically, so when I started, after I decided, okay, I'm going to make an action figure line, I got my sketchbook out. The first sketch I did was Lord Eon. He was kind of the guy that set the tone. And I kind of went into one of those things where you just start sketching. I mean, they're not pretty. They're not actually pretty sketches. I just all these ideas are flooding into me, and I was like, okay, I gotta get these down on paper. And Captain Wolf Moon, really, he was one of the later sketches that I did, but he was basically just an attempt to say, okay, I want to put together, an animal guy and a pirate guy and a cybernetic, let's try to just put all these things that I think are cool into one figure. And after I did the sketch, I mean, I just thought, okay, this is working, and this is really, I was really, really excited about him. So, as a character, he's been fun to write. I mean, he's probably one of my favorite ones to write in the book, and you'll definitely see that as people read the comic books. But the idea behind him is you don't really know where he comes from, and his background is something I want to try to go into kind of slowly. But he is, basically this wolf guy, that has a cybernetic arm and a hook hand, and he runs around in a spaceship that looks like a pirate ship. And nice. he has a robot. He has a crew of robot pirates that are basically just service droids that he's put eye patches onto. And
this guy could have been a fully fledged Thundercat villain. Actually, looking at him, he's totally up for that.
Yeah. So that's the one I was like, okay, I definitely have to acknowledge Thundercats definitely being a little bit of a influence on him. So, but he's also to me like one of the more fun characters to write because he's definitely got kind of that roguish thief kind of character about him. So
nice. He's definitely one of my favorites. Looking at this,
cool.
Also, there's a bit of trap jaw in there with the hook. And is that an actual gun for a leg?
Well, you could make it that, I guess.
I was wondering if that's canon. Sorry. Okay, so it's flexible as to whether that could indeed be a gun for a leg. Yeah. The Magmoids, or should we start with the Magmoid captain and then work down from there? Or
we could probably talk about them both kind of at the same time. Because,
sure.
So basically, the Magmoid captain, they are they are probably more directly my Trapjaw kind of character in some ways because their hands, they have two robot hands, but they both come off, and you can put their different weapons on. Like the Magmoid has a shield and the blaster bow, and the Magmoid captain has a magma sword, and they're all interchangeable. And of course, the nice thing about those robot limbs, they're all shared. So you could put Captain Wolf Moon's hook on the Magmoid's hand. You could put the blaster bow on you could give it to Uplink. So it's all shared parts there.
So the more figures you get, the more combinations you can get.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's something. The Magmoids, they are meant to be army builders. So, whether people buy a whole bunch of them or not, the idea is that in future series, you'll see different kinds of, not Magmoids, but they're called Oids. OIDS is what I call them. And they're basically these little, the idea behind it is there's a mystery villain who eventually will reveal, who releases these silver orbs onto these planets, and then they mix with the local elements. And in this case, they were on the first adventure takes place on a planet full of volcanoes, so that's why they had magma. But you could see future things. And what I'd like to try to do is introduce different weapons in each series, so then eventually, as you collect them, you'll have all kinds of options in the future.
Cool.
And like I said before, too, the Magmoids and the Magmoid Captain, they're very much influenced to a certain extent by Crystar, the villains in those. Especially the red and orange color scheme there.
And you said the torso and head will be translucent plastic, so they'll share that element.
Yeah, and that should be, and that's the thing. And actually, that's sort of the old Crystar figures. The magma guys were not translucent. The crystal people were, but the magma guys were kind of solid plastic. But I was like, okay, I always wish they were translucent plastic. Yeah. So this is my way of kind of doing that.
Nice. I remember there were some rock lords that were based on gemstones as well. I had a couple of them which were translucent, and not enough translucent figures in the 80s. So I'm bringing that one back and making the most of it. Okay, so that's the characters. Is there any more you can reveal about the mini comic books that come with the figures and why they're significant for I suppose moving the line forwards?
Yeah, well, so there'll be a total of 5 mini comics, and they're all connected. So back in the 80s, they you pretty much had a one and done story.
Yeah.
But I wanted to change that up a little bit, just to basically give you a little bit more story for your money. So they're all connected. It's a 5-part story, and one of the things, to me, the reason why they're significant, and the reason why there wasn't really a choice to me whether that I included them or not, was because I'm introducing these characters that no one's ever heard of, right?
Of course, yeah.
And
without the accompanying animated show that Thundercats, He-Man, G.I. Joe had.
Yeah, exactly. And I just felt like, a lot of the action figure lines that you're seeing coming out from indie toy makers, I mean, well, not a lot of them, but some of them, they're really cool characters, but just me personally, I have a hard time getting into some of them as much as I might, because there's no story there. You need some context. Yes, yeah. And the story was always huge for me, because, I mean, the comic books that came with the He-Man figures, I mean, I would read those over and over again. I mean, and this was back before, VHS was even particularly common, and you couldn't just watch your animated show over and over. So that was the thing that, just kind of lived on. So I'm really hoping, that the comic book and the characters in people's minds is not just a free pack-in, it is part of the essential, part of the whole experience of buying the figures.
Yeah, of course. Okay, well, that all absolutely stands to reason. I just wanted to make sure that was as clear as possible. Thank you. Right, so the next one would be, I mean, this one you don't have to go into immense amounts of detail, but just to sort of clarify, what are the Kickstarter levels that you're offering?
Sure, yeah, and they're pretty simple, actually, and I did that on purpose because I didn't want to try to, sometimes the Kickstarter levels can become very confusing, but basically you can just choose one of each character. So you can get, Starbreaker, Uplink, or Wolf Moon, or whichever one you want. Then there's the Quester level, which is all 5 characters, and you do get a bit of a price break if you get them all together. You definitely get some shipping savings. The next one is the Readers level, and that's basically you'll get the 5 action figures on card, and then you'll get the 5 comic books separately. So if you wanted to keep the figures mint and package, but you still wanted to read the comic books, that's the one you want to do. And then the very last level I have right now is a mint on card collector. So if you wanted to have basically it's 2 sets, so you can open one and then keep one mint on card. So
ideally, I'd love to do that. I don't. I would. That's the kind of level I love to see being offered out, because there is no right or wrong answer to it, whether it comes down to mint on card or get them out to play with it. It really comes down to personal preference, and to be able to do both, definitely a bonus.
Yeah, it's always one of those things where I mean, there's very few lines I've done that with myself, but there are times when you're ripping into a packaging, you're like, oh, this looks so great, I just want to, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you stick it on the shelf and you're like, shall I open it today?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so if you folks don't want to put yourself through that torture, but you do want to own these, then the mint on card level, that's at the top. So say the fates are smiling on us all and you hit your 70k target. What's next after that?
Well, basically, if we hit the target, I mean, if the Kickstarter is still going on, there is a stretch goal at the $85,000 level.
Of course, true, yep.
And that is the Kickstarter exclusive yellow Magmoid, which would be very exciting to get to, because I just think it would be fun to have another color there in the mix.
Absolutely.
And they're actually, if for some reason we manage to get that far, there are some sort of ideas I have for other stretch goals, but after the Kickstarter is done, and if I can hit my target, I'm pretty much ready to go as far as just telling my factory, okay, here's the money for the molds, go at it. And that's and that's why I wanted to make sure that we are far enough along, because some Kickstarters, whatever they may be, sometimes they start off with just a sketch, or they give you a sketch and you're like, well, I don't know. It's like
still very conceptual, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of scary. So I really wanted to try to make it clear to people that, I have taken these and I've spent the time and the money and the development to get them pretty much ready to go. And I'm still working on a few details here and there with the factories going back and forth on the prototypes, but other than that, they're pretty much good to go. And if we hit the 70,000 target, I can definitely get Series 1 out, and I would like to start development on Series 2. So
that was going to be my next question. So Series 1, if you can hit that goal, what month in 2015 would you be going for release for people who'd already backed it?
Well, right now I believe I have May of 2015. And I will tell you, that's probably a little, because what I wanted to do was under promise and over deliver.
Gotcha.
So a lot of times they give you a date and then it's like a year later and you're like, oh man, that's rough. So I'm thinking they might actually get done before that, but let's just say May 2015 is the target.
Yeah, no, it's a good policy. So that being the case, and you go ahead with a Series 2, when would you start pitching the new characters and sort of preparing for that one?
Well, that sort of depends on how much. It kind of depends on what the reaction to the first line of figures is after the Kickstarter's done. Because if I make the $70,000 level, theoretically, inventory-wise, I should have about 500 of each figure left over, and if they're selling well, then I can pretty much start on Series 2. And I'd really like to. Ideally, I would like to get Series 2 out maybe fall of 2015 would be my preference. Okay. And I'm hoping to not have to keep going back to Kickstarter. I mean, again, that kind of depends on how well the excess sells through and if there's enough money to reinvest into the next line. But yeah, that's the idea.
So ideally, if you can set up the infrastructure of a website where people can actually directly order these things from you as well.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Gotcha. Right then, and are you allowed to discuss any of these characters that would feature in Season 2? Would Lord Eon himself make an appearance, or is he definitely like a background guy?
Well, yeah, no, I can definitely kind of... So basically, when I was designing Series 1, in the very beginning, I laid out at least, pretty solidly through the next few series.
Gotcha.
And Lord Eon, I can definitely reveal to you that Lord Eon and Boostar, which are two of the main heroes, would be the people that you'd see in Series 2.
Is Boostar the chap with the wings and the helmet?
Yep, that's him. Yep.
He's got a bit of an Ace McCloud thing going on. What was the name of the guy from the New Adventures of He-Man?
Oh, Flipshot, or or Icarius. I think in the UK it might have been Icarius.
Oh wow, okay.
But yeah, they had two different names. But yeah,
they got that vibe going on. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Boostar basically he is. I've always loved guys with rocket packs, like Rocketeer. There was Commander Hawk from Captain Power.
Boba Fett.
Boba Fett. I mean, you got like a guy with the rocket pack, so he's definitely from that. So. So, Lord Eon and Boostar are planned, and then I'm going to have some new villains, which I will, reveal later if it comes to that. So
the heroes will always be outnumbered.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yep. At least
that's good. Keep them on the back foot.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, everyone likes the villains too. The villains are probably some of the most fun to design too.
Absolutely,
so that always helps.
Without excellent tangible villains, you hear us just standing around looking heroic with not all that much to do.
Exactly.
John, thank you so much for being so generous with your time here today. And where can people go if they want to find out more about this? Is there a place beyond the Kickstarter page itself?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This has been great.
Oh, no worries.
And eonquest.com is the main website, and that's where you can find pretty much everything. I've got a blog on there. There's the comic book. There's biographies of each of the action figures, and that's pretty much the central source of everything. There's a Facebook page that I keep updated quite a bit. It's facebook.com/EonQuest.
Okay.
So those are the two places that you can come and find out everything that you might want to find out.
And as with the Amazing Heroes Kickstarter, once this goal is reached, would you be happy to come back for a quick epilogue to this video?
Yeah, that would be perfect. Yeah, either way, I'm happy to do it.
Cool. So there you have it, folks. Go get yourself over to Eon Quest and show some support. Spread it about on Twitter and Facebook. Do not just keep this to yourself. Any forums that you may frequent, talk about this. A single dollar makes you part of the creative process and keep this kind of project flying through the universe. Thank you again for coming on, John. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
This has been Alex Shaw for Action Figure Resource.
Action. figures. Resource. actionfiguresresource.com